What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Good Wolf Project. I'm your host, Jerry Scarlato, and today's conversation is with Anthony Amunategui. Anthony is the founder of the CDO Group, which is a commercial construction firm that is on its way to a nine-figure business, which is absolutely amazing. He's had that business up and running for 26, 27 years now. He's also the host of the Future Factory podcast. In this conversation, which is a very wide-ranging conversation, we hear about Anthony's overcoming of alcohol addiction twice in his lifetime, once in his late teens, once again in his 30s and 40s, having overcome addiction two times, absolutely amazing. And in the same at the same time, having built himself into a person that continues to improve. And while it's easy to fall into the belief that, especially if you fall into alcoholism again, it's easy to fall into the belief that that's who you are. Anthony found himself in a place where he knew that he could get out of it and he knows he can do better. Having been sober again this time around for now going on 8 years, he said this has been the time where his business has grown the most the last 8 years, even though they've been in business for 26 plus years. So if you find yourself in a position where you have habits and you have a routine that is pulling you away from the best version of yourself, from who you know you can be, from the person that you know, if you put your foot down and you paid attention, that you could become just this unstoppable force. If you find yourself in that position, then this episode is most definitely for you, because Anthony did that multiple times throughout his career. And now that he finds himself in a position where he's got himself uh, developing himself personally, ongoing, he knows that he has nothing but growth in front of him. So this is an absolutely phenomenal conversation. Make sure that you share this with anybody who is struggling in any way to push past a personal barrier, to push past any kind of barrier, because we are only our own barriers. We like to look at everything else and think that everything else is the barrier, but really we are the biggest barrier in our life. And that's a resounding focus throughout this conversation that I have with Anthony. So make sure you share this with anybody who's going through some sort of struggle like that, trying to figure out how to push to the other side of it. Also, get your own pen and paper out and enjoy this conversation with Anthony Amunategui. All right, Anthony, like we were talking about before we got started, I think we got a good layout in front of us, but I want to get to know where you were before you started CDO. I want to get to know your environment before you started in business. Generally, I can poke around and I can find some stories here and there. And the closest thing that I could find is that you grew up in a lower income environment. So, can you set that stage for us so that we can build up to where you are today, which a much different environment than that?
Yeah. First of all, thanks for letting me be on the show. I'm grateful to be here. I love your show. You've got some great content, and it's been fun listening to you. And just it's an honor to be on the show. So thanks for having me here today. You're right. Life started off a little rocky. I was my father died young. My father was a gangster, right? He got shot by a police officer. He was, troubled in the sense that I don't know that he had a gift or had anybody who trained him on how to be successful. He did what he knew. Here, by the way, this is $10,000 worth of therapy. He did what he knew how to do to survive. And I think I let him off the hook for whatever, wherever he ended up in life. My mother worked at Denny's. She ends up remarrying to a great guy who ends up becoming my stepfather, and ultimately my father, who raises me and really teaches me to become a man. It wasn't easy. I had a very rebellious young man, and went through drug addiction at as early 17. Ended up in my first rehab, or ended up in jail and rehab at 17. And I come out of that, and I find sobriety, and I find a new way of living, and I had some great mentors that grabbed me. So they saw me trying, and they grabbed onto me. And for the next 11 years, life really propelled. I got some great. I started a little painting company, and I got my first project painting a Banana Republic for My first commercial project was painting a Banana Republic for a guy, and uh, he uh, he taught me some lessons. I'm not sure I made any money, but I definitely learned some lessons. But it was early on, right? So went from those real kind of troubling days of growing up broke and not having a real good roadmap. Somewhere around 17, 18, I really start to kick in, and those next years of my life really become formidable and kind of create the future I end up having.
So you said you met some met some mentors. How did they come about when you got out of, if I'm putting this all together, when you got out of jail, when you kind of got yourself cleaned up, got out of rehab, whatever that looked like? Were they just happened to be kind of in the neighborhood? Did you get a job and that's where they were? How'd you find those mentors?
You know, I was young. I was 17, so I went to juvenile detention center. I spent a week there, and from there I ended up going to treatment. I spent 3 months in treatment, and they said, "Hey, you're going to get out of here, but you need some help." And they started taking me to AA meetings and A meetings, and they said, "You're going to need a sponsor." And I found this guy named Bob, and Bob became my sponsor, and he just started showing me some great ways to live. And really, if you guys get into the 12 steps program, they're dynamic. If you really jump into them, there's a great way of living. Really start to look at, all right, look, I admit that I have a problem. Start working on that. Start taking inventory of how your thoughts, actions, behaviors were causing the life that you're living, and then you start to change those, right? As I start to work on those, then I had a really good friend one day. So my friend Lance, he invites me out to dinner. He goes, "Hey, you want to go out to dinner?" I'm like, "Sure." He goes, "Bring $50." I go, "Wait, hold on. You're inviting me out to dinner. I got to bring $50." And he's like, yeah. We're gonna stop by this cool thing. You're gonna love it. And so we go to this hotel, and I know there's something weird going on because there's all these people walking around and they're like way too happy. They're like looking in the eye and they're all like shaking your hand. And I'm like, all right, there's something weird going on here. I couldn't figure it out. Yeah, he walks up to a table and he goes, "That's my friend Anthony. He'd like to sign up." I'm like, "What are you talking about sign up?" He goes, "You trust me?" I go, "Yeah." He goes, "Give me the other $50." And he goes, "Here." And I gave the lady $50, or I gave him $50. He gives it to the lady. He goes, "Oh, by the way, you owe her 240 more bucks." I go, "What?" He goes, "Yeah, I just signed you up for this course called Landmark Education." And I'm this I think it was 17 or 18 years old. I'm like, "What is this?" And it was this great course. It was like this course where, you started to have some great distinctions about it started my self-help, some of my awareness work that I didn't have before I did that. And you started to see that there was kind of things that happened and then the story about the things that happened to me, right? So there's kind of like life and the story I made up about life. And then you could start to see how I started influencing that. And that really was the start of some, between that and the 12 steps of AA, really, those two things really started giving me a good roadmap for, oh, if you want life to be different, I might have to do some different behaviors. And so I feel like those two gifts, the combination of those two gifts, really started a lifelong road of work that really, has changed my life.
Lifelong is true because lifelong it is. Development is an ongoing process. Many of people see it as an end goal. We were talking a little bit beforehand, but I owned a fitness studio for 10 years. And one of the biggest problems is fitness is people think that there is an end to it. I want to get in shape. It's like you don't get in shape and then you stop. You got to keep going. And mental development is the same way. Personal development is the exact same way. The analogy that I've also heard is it's like taking a bath. Like you don't just take a bath once and then everything's good and you're good to go for a while. Like eventually you're going to smell funny and you're going to want to take a bath again. But it's the same thing with personal development. It's the same thing with fitness. Like when you stop, you get unfit. When you stop your personal development, like your mentality changes, like it starts to shift again. So you got to pay attention to those things regularly for sure. And it's an ongoing process. Um, Going back a little bit. So yeah, the serenity prayer, which I believe is a big part of AA, correct?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it basically says, there's things you can control, and there's things you can't control, and you've got to let go of the things that you can't control, and you got to understand the things that you can control. Um, so thinking about that in particular, how were you able to take kind of that idea, the things I can't control, things I can't control, and help that kind of start to change your pattern of behavior?
Jerry, what's funny about that was I couldn't see that from where I started. Like
Mm,
I couldn't see that I had agency in some of these things, right? I had this very victim mentality. Look, if your dad died by the hand of a gun, if your dad was a gangster, if your mom worked at Denny's, if you grew up in Pompano, if you grew up poor, like that, all those were when I started, that's why I was the way I was. And being a victim, there was no agency, right? There was nothing I could do. I was all victim to my upbringing, and all of that stuff, kind of dragged me. It kept me from seeing it. Now, all of a sudden, if I could, look at that and start to change that, and I started to create, who I was the culmination of all the thoughts, actions, behaviors I have, right? Then I started saying, all right, those are the things I can change. Now, I'm not going to say it's easy because look, that first, in AA, you kind of go through the steps. And one of the steps, the fourth step, is really where you start to do this inventory of your life. And it starts with all the kind of the good, bad, and the ugly. And when you start to look at that, it's great, right? So you have all these stories, well, this happened and that happened and this happened. And the one that's the hardest part was when you get to the point where, all right, what was your part in making that happen? Right? This guy did that to me. This guy did that to me. Okay, great, great, great. What was your part? Right? All of a sudden, you start to notice I had a part in it, and it was some of the stories I had. Like I'll give you a great one about my mom. Well, my mother worked at Denny's, and your life would be tough too if your mother worked at Denny's, and all of a sudden I started looking at what was making her wrong, right? And then someone reminded me, did she have any? Now this is a single mother who came from Italy who barely spoke the language. She went to work, and I can remember mornings waking up where she'd be sitting at the sewing machine sleeping with literally with a pair of pants in her hand for, she was making after work money. She worked, essentially three jobs. And when I started to look at this woman did everything she possibly could to give me the life that I had, right? When I reconfigured that story, and all of a sudden, today, that's the wind under my wings, the wind in my sails that really, when I get tired and I think I can't take anymore, I think about her and go, shut up, get back to work, right? Stop. That woman she gave you everything she possibly could. So those are the things that I think are a gift in doing some of the work. Sometimes, when I'm a victim, I couldn't see that. And all of a sudden I got out of that victim mentality and I started to have an agency there. I think that's a fun part to look at.
That's pretty incredible, for sure. The fact that she did all of that hard work, and I can imagine how easy it would be, especially as a teenager, to kind of buy into that story. Very easy to kind of get caught up, especially if you have people, friends around you that maybe they're doing a little better, or their parents will give them money or whatever the thing is, and you're like, oh, my parents don't do anything, and so on and so forth. It's very easy to get caught up, I would imagine. It's very easy to get caught up in that story, but it's amazing that you still use that today to be able to guide your thinking, and to be able to guide you out of any negative victimhood thinking you might still have, or not still have, but you might find yourself kind of getting into today.
Yeah, for sure. You know, you, that starts a way of life that you start going, all right, what's my part in all the things that happened? Right. Certainly when I was drinking and doing drugs, the problem with that for me is as soon as I start that, the next thing that happens is my brain, and there's a voice in my brain. I call him Fred. Right? I've named him. He's such a, Fred's kind of a jackass. And Fred, whenever I was drinking and doing drugs, or when I'm doing bad things for my body, Fred gets the efforts, right? He blames everybody else, and if I can't do it right, I can't do it at all, right? When I don't drink or I don't do bad things to my body, and I have hard things, even if I fail them, right? I want to do better, right? I get up and I actually want to do better. And, today, even when things don't go perfect, and believe me, I just became a pilot, right? As I was going through the process, I failed the pilot's exam. And I remember like Fred in my head, like, see, you're too old. You can't pass tests. You're stupid, right? There was like that voice in your head that was like talking me out of it. But I knew that that wasn't true, right? I knew that all I needed to do was I needed to study a little more, right? And maybe it was embarrassing because I'm 56 years old now, and yeah, keeps I'm 56. That's my right age. I'm 56, and I had to go back and study, and I put the work in, and I it took putting the work in, and even when I was taking the second test, Fred in my head was trying me. You're not going to pass this. You're not. And I literally had to go question by question and just remember my training. I did relentless training, right? I went through, you know, I tried, I worked every single day on that test. And I got to the end when the lady said you passed, I literally cried in the room because, it was like one of those feelings like, forget what Fred says. I put the work in. Today I can do the work, even when there's things in my brain that will try to talk me out of it.
Well, and what's amazing is that considering your level of success in business, most people would look at that and go, well, how can you doubt yourself at all? I mean, considering the level of success that you've had in business, a nine-figure business at this point, how can you even question yourself? Most people would be, that's crazy. It doesn't make any sense. Um, but what they don't recognize is that you're a human being. Like that's what happens. And piloting a plane is a completely different endeavor than piloting a business. Not that you probably still question yourself in business and areas as well, but you're piloting a plane. It's a brand new thing to you. It's something you're teaching yourself to do. And that's why I say like you have to constantly stay on top of that voice in your head. We may not all have Fred in our head, but we all have some voice,
Yeah.
whatever you want to name it, whatever you want to call it, it's all there. That's actually the premise of the podcast. The name of the podcast is Good Wolf Project. The story comes from an old Cherokee legend where a Cherokee chief is sitting down with his grandson and they're sitting around a fire and the Cherokee chief says, son, we all have two wolves inside of us. One of them is a bad wolf that's filled with hate and envy and greed and so on and so forth, and one of them's a good wolf filled with joy and empathy and compassion. And the grandson sits there and thinks for a second, and he goes, "Well, Grandpa, if we all have two wolves inside of us, which one wins?" And he says, "The one you feed." So that's literally what you just described there was having to constantly feed that side of you that knew you could pass the test versus giving in to the other side that I don't want to say wanted you to fail, but was
Yeah.
trying to convince you to fail.
The whole reason why I became a pilot was I was sitting home with it. My wife went out with some friends, right? And she had gone out, and the kids were gone, and I was sitting in the house by myself watching TV. It was like a Sunday afternoon or something, and my wife and they were out, and I noticed that I was grumpy. I was actually jealous. Truth was, I was jealous. I was sitting home alone. She went out with some friends. I don't know. I was just being lazy, and then I noticed I was getting jealous. And Fred, or that bad wolf, right? That bad wolf was trying to talk me into, see, life's boring. Why do you do this? Forget your wife. Like, how could she be out without you? And I realized that was all nonsense, right? And in that moment, that's when I started the podcast, right? That's where a Future Factory podcast started. And the next day, I started pilot lessons. I called a flight school and I said, "Hey, I'd like to come in for discovery flight." And the next day, I went down and I started to learn to fly. And it was like, why are you jealous? You're sitting here, it's your bad wolf talking. You just, you got lazy. You thought you were going to sit around. And the truth is, when you sit around, you feel like you're going backwards. So go do something about it. Right. And that's where that next gift, I went and fed the good wolf. And that feeling of going through that, I think that's, and when we need friends around us that can help remind us that that's okay. You're going to have days when the bad wolf or Fred come at you, but use their example of, all right, let's find a way to feed the good wolf.
Success breeds success for sure, and small wins matter more than we tend to believe they do. So let's go back to 17 to 20-year-old Anthony. So you got your painting job.
Mhm.
I'm assuming that's how you kind of found your way in construction, which
Yep.
then I'm assuming eventually led to the founding of CDO, which there's a big gap there because if I'm doing my math correctly, you founded CDO at around 30, give or
Yeah.
take.
Yeah. So
So there's about a 10-year period in there. Um, what does that look like?
So, it goes from getting that job, right? So getting it was a Banana Republic, right? So this guy talks me into doing the Banana Republic. And back then, Banana Republics had like, I don't know, 20 different whites. There's antique white and white and Bahama white. And I didn't realize that there was that many whites to begin with. And I had never done a commercial job ever. Right. So this guy kind of talked me to doing it for like $5,000. It was probably worth 15,000 bucks. But the truth was, I learned, right? I did most of the work myself. I brought a couple of college buddies in. And from there, he gave me a playground for kids called Discovery Zone. And Discovery Zone were these big ball bins, like in front of McDonald's, those big ball bins. There's like this big playground, Chuck E. Cheese style. And the ductworks were all different colors. And the water lines were one color, electric lines were another color, and the ductwork was another color. And so imagine being in Florida, right? And the higher you go up, the hotter it is. You're on a job site with no air conditioning, right? It's really hot. I figured out if I took all of the pipes and all the ductwork and I painted them in the parking lot, right? If I put some tarps down and I sprayed them all in the parking lot, all I would have to do is when they put them up in the air, I just have to touch them up. So I wouldn't have to be up there where it's 115 degrees, sweating right. So it was out of really survival, right? But some project manager walked in, he goes, how'd you paint this place so fast? I go, well, this is what I did. And I did it on the field. And he goes, that's genius. He goes, look, we're having this cost cutting thing we're bringing one of each sub to Chicago. I'll buy you a ticket to Chicago if you want to come to Chicago. And we're going to invite you to this cost cutting thing. And I said, great. I get a free ticket to Chicago. And yeah, so I got invited up there. And I remember my first day going in the office at Discovery Zone. I literally thought I was going to pass out. I'm this little redneck kid, right? I went, my knees are knocking. I had to go to the 33rd floor. I get off this elevator and like, I came up in Florida, right? There was more concrete in from the train to where that building was than I'd seen in my entire life. And there was just millions of people. And I thought, oh my God, they're going to find out I'm a fraud. They're going to find out I made all this stuff up. And I went in there, I sat at the table, and this guy goes, hey, you want a job? I'm like, no, I don't think so, but I'll think about it. Let me think about it. I was going to be an accountant at the time. I was going through college and I was going to become an accountant. And I go back to Florida, and someone stole my trailer. Like I had a little like one of those little trailers with all my pressure cleaners and painting stuff in it. And I looked up in the air and I said, "All right, dude, I guess you're telling me something." And in that moment, I had this like God moment where like it felt like this is what I was supposed to do. And I called the guy and said, yeah, I'll take the job. And I moved to Chicago and I've never looked back. Right. So I went from there at Discovery Zone. They stopped building. Then I went to Boston Market and I built Boston Market for a bunch of years. And then I did Einstein Bagels was another brand. I went over there and became a director of construction there. And then I went on to Panera Bread and built the first Panera Breads ever. And then I started this company with some guys I worked with at Boston Market. And then I bought the company from them. And now it's been 27 years of doing this. And, who you become to lead a company over this period of time, that's been the gift. CDO Group, not only is it a good way to make income, it's who I get to become to lead the company, right? The man that I get to become. And, you know, like every day I have to break through a new paradigm as a human being to grow the company. Most companies don't falter because of the business. There's plenty of work out there. Most of it is the leader. And for me, that's the case. It's really, I'm the bottleneck, right? When I have bigger, bolder ideas, when I can lead my people to bigger ideas, then they happen, right? So, I think that's when the gifts is as a leader looking at yourself going, all right, how could I grow me to grow this organization? And every time I've done that, taken a bigger, bolder step or grown or learned some new behaviors or read a new book, all of those impact the leader I get to be with the people that are here.
Hmm. Uh, yes, I can agree with that fully, 100%, full stop as well. And I would say again, the more, if you're listening to this, the more that you can take that idea and put it into any part of your life, probably the better off you're going to be. And I would say that goes with relationships, that goes with your health, that goes with almost every part of your life. Because the more that you can say, I am responsible for this, I am responsible for making this better, I am responsible for improving it, the more likely it's going to happen. Like that's what it comes down to. So I can fully agree with that. And having the business that I had for 10 years, I see it. I know that like I was the barrier. Now in the moment, did I know that? It took me some time to figure that out for sure, but I figured it out eventually. But at the same time, you also have to have good people around you that are willing and comfortable to tell you the blind spots that you're missing, because as the
Mhm.
leader, you have blind spots, whether you are, well, you're not aware of them, because that's why they're called blind spots. So I think having those people around you is also equally as imperative.
Absolutely. And that's what happens is as you change, you know, 7 years ago, I had a big change in the organization, right? Like the man I became 7 or 8 years ago, really started impacting the people I could hire, right? All of a sudden, I started hiring different people. And I would say you can almost see it's almost like we're a startup company these last 7 years, right? The people that I was able to hire after that, right? Today, I find these amazing human beings to work with. And as opposed to the days when I was drinking, right? So at 28, I went back out and I thought I could drink again, right? So I spent from 28 to 48 drinking. And look, life didn't fall apart, but it wasn't growing, right? I wasn't this guy who was growing. And I decided to stop again and get sober, and that was 8 years ago. And you can see a line right there where I start growing again, and the clarity of vision and the ability to be sober minded and to be able to be with people. At one point I was taking people, I would interview people, and then I would take them out drinking. You go, well, if I'm going to hire you, you should be able to go out drinking with me. And I'm like, that was just such a foolish idea, right? Like who wants to work for a guy that they went out drinking with, right? You're looking for a leader that's going to make them better, right? Someone that can guide them, and that's what happened. Was when I get sober and I really get back into working hard on Anthony, right? I start finding some amazing people, and those amazing people start to really grow the organizations that I own today. And I have multiple organizations, and they're all the people who run those are really great people, right? I've found a team of people who surround me that really become and create the organizations that I have, and together I support them, and as a leader, I can bring whole other visions for them, right? I can be with them in a way that allows them to take bold moves and be brave and go do big ideas, because the ground's going to be there when they take that step. Their foot's going to be there, as opposed to when I was a drinker. You might not know, right? Anthony might or might not be there. He might have had the flu that day, or or whatever. It just wasn't. It wasn't a very. It wasn't something you could count on. Today, I feel like you can count on me. I'm here. I'm gonna be part of this. I'm gonna even the tough days. And there are, you look, no matter what you say, look, a multi-million-dollar company. We're well into the six figures, well into years where we've made great, amazing money. And then there's years where things go down, or side years. Everybody has ups and down years, and sometimes that bad wolf will kick in, or Fred will kick in and say, "See, here it comes again. It's going to fall apart." And you go, "No, do what you do." Today I know how to get back on the beam, right? On those moments when the bad wolf's talking, I know how to feed the good wolf. And you just start feeding the good wolf and get back on the beam. And it's just one step after another one, just like that test. Every error, every question, I had to psych myself up to go back and go, stop. Don't listen to him. Don't listen to that voice. Don't listen to Fred. Just you've got great training. You know what to do here. Just put the fundamentals into play. Dial, call your customers, call the people, all your employees, do the things that work, right? Put the work in. And I've never done the work and on the backside of it not have it pay off. It always pays off. It always. You can't, if you work hard, you know, uh, you ever see that expression? You ever hear that the story about where when someone breaks down in their car and they're sitting in their car waiting for someone to help them and no one wants to help them, or they feel like no one wants to help them. But as soon as they get out and start pushing the car, there's 10 people trying to help them. I feel like life's that way.
Mm, that is, that's so good. And to go back to your point about, hiring people that are going to go, drinking with you and whatnot, maybe part of you is also looking for that kind of person, to some degree. And if you're looking for that kind of person, that's a different kind of person than the person that demands excellence for themselves and for the organization and for the owner, for that matter, or their leader or their boss or whatever. So certainly it's going to be a different kind of person that you find who is, no matter how much they're um, experiences or any accolades that they might have, if they are also the kind of person who might go out and drink and have a good time, and they happen to do that on a Tuesday night when they need to get up and do a project Wednesday morning, that's doesn't bode well for the business. So making that shift in yourself makes a shift in the organization as a whole. And that kind of awareness is incredible. Obviously, it took you some time to build that awareness. You said from 28 to 48, 2 decades of finding yourself back in the habit of, just living the whatever life that you kind of wanted to live. How did you find yourself getting back out of it? Was there a moment of
Yeah,
awareness or just kind of slowly started digging again?
Jerry, it was a moment. When I say a moment, there was this moment of clarity. Like it was a you know, people had come and done essentially interventions. My wife had said, "Hey, maybe you should cut back a little bit." And hey, some people in my office that cared about me, "Hey, we're worried about you. You doing all right?" My mother had done an intervention. She had called me to Florida and said, "Hey, we're concerned about you." And I was like, "No, don't worry, I got this. Don't worry, I got this." And the truth is sometimes you're stuck in a disease. Alcoholism and drug addiction is a self-justifying behavior, right? And you can't sometimes see it. And look, even when I would say, "Don't worry, I got this," I really meant it. Like I wasn't lying to get back out to go drink. I literally, in the moment, meant it.
You
Or
believed it. Hmm.
yeah, like every Sunday night when 60 Minutes would come on, that tick 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 tick, I would say, "That's it. This week I'm going to straighten out. Don't worry, I'm going to straighten out." And all I need is a couple of weeks of just straightening out, and everything will be back to good. And it wouldn't. The next day I'd be drinking again. And today there was that moment. There was that small moment, call it another God moment, right? A little God moment that said, "Hey, you don't got this." And I woke up that morning. I said to my wife, "I don't got this. I need help." And I remember I found this treatment center in South Bend, Indiana. It was mostly all heroin addicts. I had never done heroin. I mean, I wasn't doing heroin. There were really these heroin addicts and meth heads, and there was a Scientology treatment center. Look, I'm telling you, but I didn't care. My insurance company said, "Hey, they'll pay for it." I called them. I Ubered there. I went from Chicago to South Bend, Indiana, which is
Wow.
about I don't know, 150, 200-mile drive. And imagine this. It was the girl's, it was a little female. It was her first day ever Ubering. Right. I was her second customer. And I'm telling you, it was funny. Another God moment, one of those higher power moments where, just, I said, "Hey, I'm going to the treatment." And we were talking, it was a long way to talk, and it was great. Right. I get the treatment, and, you know, I spent 30 days in this crazy facility, and I made the best of it because I wanted to be sober. Like I knew, like the 11 years I did earlier in my life when I was sober, life was great, right? This amazing stuff happened, right? And then I knew I wanted to get back there. I just, was stuck on this merry-go-round. I didn't care if they would have told me to, I don't know, wear a striped dress every day. I would have wore a striped dress every day. And the fact that they were Scientologists, look, they were really good people. They were trying to help me. And there was some great L. Ron Hubbard stuff. I mean, the truth is, if you listen to some of his training and teaching, some of that stuff was actually quite impressive. I was really, if you got out of judging them for their religion and kind of enjoyed them for their religion, I picked up some great knowledge about that, and they had like 4 or 5 tracks a day. I took all 4 of them, And I got up, I was first up and last to bed and jumped in. Like, that's just who I am. I'm a kind of, attack it with all hands on deck. And I jumped in and, yeah, I walked out of there with 30 days under my belt. And that's what I needed, right? I needed those that get off the merry-go-round for a little bit. And again, I got back into it. I got a sponsor. I got back into AA. I started really working hard on that. And these last 8 years sobriety have just been a great gift of really constantly working on Anthony. You know, when when you're sober, at least when I'm sober, I want to do better. Even on my even days when I don't do well, right? If I'm not eating right or if I'm not working out right, I'll wake up the next day and go, all right, today I'm gonna try again. Right. I think there's the one inside of me that wants to do better. I don't get the efforts when I'm sober.
Um, Congratulations, by the way, for 8 years again. And I'm certain many years to follow for sure, with the dedication and the passion that you're speaking about it. One thing that I think many people would bode well to do is to learn from people that they don't agree with. You're talking about going to a rehab place that was based around Scientology, and many people look at that and they go, nuts, crazy.
Yeah.
What are you thinking? And you kind of go, well, the truth of the matter is that's another human being on the other side of me. We agree on 99% of the world. It's just the 1% that we happen to disagree on, but that doesn't mean that I can't learn anything from them. There's still something there for sure. I can learn. And like I said, we're humans, so we are 99% compatible when it comes to everything else outside of that. So not the fact, the belief that I'm better than them because they happen to have a different, belief than me and I can't learn anything from them is crazy.
I mean, so since then, I've started this whole new wonder on religions. Look, if I described my religion, my to people, it would be if we rewrote, my Christianity religion today. If you essentially our prophet died and then was on rose was on the cross and it was reborn. Today that would be a zombie movie, right? I mean, if they looked at my religion, they might if really they might laugh about it. It just happens to be pretty popular, and people forget that that's how. I mean, really, if you stand back and think about it, it's just as crazy. But the truth is, it works for my community, right? And now I've done a TV show where we've gone around the world. I've taken my family around the world in these last 8 years, and it's been fun. We went to Hong Kong, Vietnam, Thailand, India, Cape Town, Johannesburg, Athens, London, Lima, Cusco, Machu Picchu, and we've been able to go do one religion, one good deed, and one big adventure in each country, right? And get to like be with their religion and like get to celebrate them, and you really get to see that they all are pretty close, right? We're all, I mean, maybe different. Their languages are different. Their cultural values are different. It's their interpretation of the celestial being that brings us all here wanting to live together peacefully, finding ways to serve each other well, right? To a way to to take care of each other, and they all have a different version of it, different language of it. Some have a little angrier being as a or some don't, but here it works for them in their community, and I honor theirs. And I think when we start to honor each other's differences, right? The truth is, every man I've ever met wants the same thing for their kids that I want for mine, right? I want to raise great kids that have a better future than I had, right? I want to help my fellow man, right? I want to give more than I take, right? That's stuff that, and I think they do too. I think most of the world, given the chance, they'd want to give more than they take. It's just when we act scared, right? People act a little, when people get scared about money or eating or look, I was in Colombia and, this is going back about 10 years and there was this big warning. Americans shouldn't go to Colombia. There was kidnappings going on at the time. And I'm like, look, I, if I didn't have enough to feed my family, I might think about something that crazy to feed my family, right? Those people are just trying to survive. Now, today, I've been to Colombia a lot since then, and it's this amazingly beautiful space. I mean, Colombia is such a beautiful country. The people are so beautiful and so just so loving. It's such a great culture. Um, as economic as each country starts to raise a little bit and get some more, economics kick in a little bit better, you can see around the world where most of us are really starting to grow, right? And if we can continue to help each other, if each one helps one, this planet's a pretty good place to live on. This consciousness. Here, guys, we may be the only. So far, I'm not sure there's aliens. I'm hoping there are, but I haven't seen proof of. I saw like, some stuff on YouTube, but I'm not sure any of it's real because so far I haven't seen any. We may be it. And to think that we might mess this up by fighting over red or blue or religions that are made up by man or these crazy little made up lines in the sand we call this my country and that your country. And I'm like, those are all stories that we've made up. I think that we may blow this consciousness out by fighting over silly ideas. Um, Seems ridiculous to me when I look at it. I think to myself, we've got amazing stuff. We've done amazing stuff in the last thousands of years here as humans. We should celebrate that with each other.
Incredible. And since you've been to all those places, you've been able to see, many different cultures and many different environments and anything from the lowest of poverty to the highest of highs and everywhere in between, I'm certain. Um, and yeah, just I would second that and also add, again, we all agree on 99% of like human beings are 99% the same, but we are disagreeing on the last 1%. And the the more the then it's the last 0.1%, then it's the last 0.01%, then it's like at what point are you just gonna recognize that we're 99% the same and we're gonna disagree on 1%? And the question is, how do we just got to debate back and forth and we got to come to a resolution, and then we got to try it, and then we got to debate back and forth and check and see if it worked. And if it didn't work, try like you just got to recognize that that's the way it's going to be. Everyone's not going to agree. Everyone's not going to be the same. We're all not going to find all of a sudden click and utopia happens.
No,
You got to accept it.
I've got this primitive brain. Jerry, I literally wake up every day in Jurassic Park. My brain literally starts in Jurassic Park, right? It gets up looking for problems. It's this primitive brain, which probably served us pretty well back then. And probably back then, getting up and looking for dinosaurs was probably a good idea because if you didn't, you're probably getting eaten, right? You got to keep moving, but keep your head on a swivel. You don't want to get eaten by a T-Rex or, some pterodactyl or something. I mean, it probably made sense. But today I've got Costco and I've got more food than I ever need. And there's lots of abundance. Sometimes that primitive brain, I got to tune it into Disney World. Right. So for me, I have to start my morning with some real practice. Like I got to get a workout in. I've got to get this body moving. Right. I read a great book by Jennifer, I want to say Kaufman, but I don't think that's right. It's called the Joy of Movement, and she
McGonagall.
writes, what's that?
McGonagall.
McGonagall. There you go. There you go.
Yeah, yeah. Mhm.
And she writes about this hope gene that gets created by movement, and I just love that. I get that. Like I get up in the morning and I get to the gym. I love that when I leave the gym, no matter what I always felt like when I walked in, and there could be days when I look at myself in the mirror, I'm like, oh my God, you piece of junk. How could you still? Oh my God, you shouldn't have ate that yesterday. I walk out of the gym, I walk back, I'm like, hey, you're doing all right, right? There's a little hope. Like, all right, I could do better. I can definitely do better, but you're doing all right. You tried today, right? And then I dial in a little spirituality. I spend a little time just getting conscious and do a little spiritual practice after that. Like I can tune into Disney World pretty well, and then I'm fit for human consumption. For interaction. I can interact with others, for me as a leader for my company, I want to be tuned into Disney World before I start talking to people.
Hmm. I like that analogy. That's good. Um, a little bit of work on yourself every day certainly goes a long way.
Yeah.
Um, all right. Let me see what time we got. Okay. Before we jump off, I want to get a little tactical. So construction is very systems based, I would
Yep.
imagine.
Yep.
Um, One of the first books that I read, so for a long time I didn't read. because I was the kind of guy who was like, I don't like school and I don't like reading, so I'm just not going to do it. And then I picked up a book and I was like, oh my gosh, I can read a book and then I can do something with it. That's cool. So then I just started reading. And now it's a little bit of an obsession, and some people may call it an out of hand obsession, but it's better than other ones. But the first one that I picked up that I was able to apply was the E-Myth Revisited by that's terrible. I can't remember his name. Um, but basically, it's a book on systems. He talks about the franchise model and basically building the franchise model for your business so that then, if you needed to, you can go and just replicate the business because now all the systems are in place. And I took that book and I basically built the gym off of that book. Now there are systems that I did a good job of focusing on, and then there were some that I did a poor job of focusing on. I will fully admit that. But when it comes to systems in your business, because to have the business that you had to have redeveloped your systems over time. How do you go about building or redeveloping systems over time? Do you evaluate regularly? Do you let them break and then fix them? What does that look like?
Jerry, all ideas start with an idea, right? And to grow the idea, right, to grow it out here, you have to jump over this chasm of broken glass and spikes and barbed wire and fire. You have to walk through a pretty tough place to grow an idea. I mean, like, most people don't like to be entrepreneurs because you have to work through some really tough times, and you got to be able to walk through that space, and that's not always friendly, right? So there are times when you'll run in and you'll break it, or you'll have ideas that don't work, and then not give up. The whole idea is to be relentless, just never give up, right? There was something about being young and dumb that was great, right? You didn't know that you didn't know, and you just kept trying, right? There was something, you had imagination and creativity. Now, for me, the personal development work helps create, I my number one belief about a leader is that your job is to bring the billions of ideas of possibilities to solutions every day, right? So the idea is that the more creative I can be, and the more I clear up the stuff that's going on with Anthony, right? If I can show up at the office and I can be really, really conscious and I'm present, right? I get to bring with me. I don't drag in drama. I don't drag into the front office. I don't walk in with just the place being on fire, right? When I bring that stuff to the office place, right, I can't really bring the billions of ideas to solutions, right? Because I want to be able to look at each and every instance, and really my job as a leader is to solve things, right? And nobody walks in my office and goes, I mean, rarely, I go, hey, look how great we're having it. I mean, sometimes they do, but most of the time, being a leader is there's been all kinds of problems that get ground down to the broken glass, and they walk in with a bunch of broken glass and go, here, fix this, and there's no and you got to be able to stand there and go, all right, let's take a look at it, and enjoy solving problems and enjoy being in that space that says, when others can't see it, you're going to help them bring some clarity to it. And I think that's really the idea is that um, creating a vision, right? Most problems that are here out here started way back here, right? When you build a company, it's either there's a couple of keys to it, right? So it's either revenue, right, or expenses, right, that are causing it. And when I start back here and I create a revenue model that guarantees I have revenue, right? You want to make sure that revenue cures lots of sins,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I always tell people, if you start with your revenue model, make sure you've got really good revenue to do that. Now, creating revenue comes with another problem. Now you have execution problems, right? Now you want to build really good execution problems, and again, solving problems and execution that in the field, when you're late on a project, it didn't happen the day you were late. It started when you started the project, and today we dissect how from the second we get awarded, from the second we even start bidding on a project, right? How do we bid a project? What is our bid? Our estimating team on their wall is the exact process by which we follow. Do we follow it every day? Nope. Just like a diet or just like the gym or just like anything, we get good days and we have bad days, but we know exactly what to do when we want to get back on the beam when things aren't working, right? Because human beings will want to veer off to their own little thing. And then I gotta get back to a system. And so the second set of plans hits our office, what the head estimator does, he agrees on taking it or not taking it, when we'll deliver the estimate and an agreement with the customer, and then he'll create a bid schedule. And then that bid schedule happens. And we have a foolproof plan that follows all the way through to having a really well-defined bid. So when we hand it over to a customer, we know that we don't have scope gap, or we're not going to have the complexity of having a project that later on is going to, we're not going to make any money on, or we're not going to be able to deliver on time. So it starts with that process. And then by the time we get awarded the project, there's an exact science to turning a project into from estimating, being awarded, and then how do we start the project, right? And we walk right through that system. And every time we follow that, I promise that if we follow this process, it gives me a predictable deliverable on what we're going to make and when it's going to turn over and the quality, right? Because I followed a process. I didn't show up. Most of the construction world shows up like cowboys, right? And they come in and maybe if you're a good gunfighter, you could sit in the middle of a room and you could shoot at things, but you don't deserve it. When I follow a great process, when I create, manage, and execute on a great process, now I deliver on a predictable index more often than not. And even if I don't, even if I have a problem, at least I can figure out where to go back in the system and make those adjustments so the next time I can do it better. And I think that's the key to, creating those great processes for you and your organization is finding ways to, one, create the revenue model, then get the execution model, right? And then, start to work on, where I could do it. And by the way, there's never a day where you're not continuously moving. If you are, as a leader, start to get lackadaisical, or you start getting the places where you start to fall back on your rest on your laurels, it's just a matter of time before the cannibals start eating your company and start attacking you, and your competitors will get the work.
I imagine having been through a couple of financial milestones or grown through a couple of financial milestones, there are growing pains within those milestones. So a six-figure business is different than a seven-figure business, maybe not the beginning of seven figures, but at a certain level, and then seven is different than eight, and eight different than nine, so on and so forth. What was the hardest milestone to kind of push through?
Today. Literally, it's every day. I
Mm.
mean, look at $1 million worth of business. I mean, look, when I was doing 150 or $200,000 worth of business, I wanted to get to 1 million. And then you got to a million, then I wanted to get to 10 million. And you got to 10 million, I wanted to do 100 million, right? Every time you've broken through these next things, every day I show up and there's a group of problems that it never stops. It doesn't matter. Nothing's ever perfect. There's always stuff to work on. There's always people to find better, find better ways to work with your people, better ways to communicate. There's always something to work on in your business. If every day you don't walk in and change something, you're probably starting to die, right? You're starting to fall backwards. And there was a time I used to pray to have it be easier, right? And I know that that's an unhealthy behavior today. Today, I pray to be stronger, right? Today, I pray that, the world is not going to, it's not going to get easier, right? To build a great company takes strength. And you got to keep standing in that space of, all right, things are going to get messed up. I mean, they're going to get really messed up. And now all you just got to do is got to keep building.
I think the moral of today's story is it is daily growth on the personal level and it is daily growth on the business level.
Relentless personal growth on both fronts. And yeah, that's Jerry. That's why I love your podcast. Like, look, it gives me ideas. I listen to other entrepreneurs. I listen to other leaders that go through these things, and I get to learn from them. And that's why your podcast is so popular. It's a great podcast. Thanks for doing it.
Anthony, I appreciate you so much. Thanks for your time. Where can people find you?
You can see me at cdogroup.com. You can catch me on LinkedIn, Anthony Amunategui, Amunategui on LinkedIn. Love talking to people. Put some comments down below. Look, hey guys, put some comments on Jerry's podcast down below, and I promise that Jerry and I will be happy to respond to them. And you also see me at Future Factory is my podcast, Future Factory podcast. It's on all the platforms, so YouTube and all the great platforms out there. So I'd love to see you come by and say hi to us over there.
You guys, make sure you check that out. I'll put that in the description so that you can easily access it. Anthony, thanks for your time, brother. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Jerry. Appreciate you.